The colony world of New Thessaly was not an important place. It sat on the very edge of human space, far from Earth and far from anything that mattered to the great powers of the galaxy. 12,000 people lived there, growing crops and raising families in the shadow of purple mountains. They had no army, they had no warships, they had nothing worth stealing. Alina Chen liked it that way. She stood at the window of her small administrative office, watching her twin children walk home from school. Maya and Theo were 16 years old now, tall and healthy and completely ordinary. They argued about something as they walked, pushing each other playfully. Alina smiled. This was the life she had wanted for them, quiet, safe, boring. She turned back to her desk and the pile of farming reports that needed her attention: crop yields, water distribution, equipment repairs. The small problems of a small world. She was halfway through approving a request for new irrigation pumps when the first explosion shook the building. Alina was on her feet before the sound faded. She moved to the window and looked up. Dark shapes descended through the clouds, ships, military ships. Her trained eye counted them in seconds. 12 assault transports, 4 gunships, 2 command vessels. Valdrin. The word hit her like a punch to the stomach. The Valdrin hegemony controlled a vast empire on the far side of the galactic arm. They had fought humanity twice in the past 50 years. Both wars had ended in human victory. Both wars had cost millions of lives. A peace treaty had held for 16 years. That peace was ending now. Alina ran not towards safety, toward her children. The streets of the colony were already filling with chaos. People screamed and ran in every direction. Valdrin soldiers dropped from the sky on grav chutes, their gray-skinned bodies wrapped in black armor. They were tall creatures with 4 arms and compound eyes that saw in every direction at once. They carried pulse rifles that could burn through steel. Alina had killed many of them in her previous life. She remembered exactly how she found Maya and Theo hiding behind an overturned vehicle. They were scared but unhurt. Alina grabbed them both and pulled them close. "Mom," Theo said, his voice shaking. "What's happening? Who are they?" "Listen to me," Alina said. Her voice was calm and cold, a voice her children had never heard before. "We need to get to the emergency shelter. Stay behind me. Do exactly what I say. Do you understand?" They nodded. They were good children, smart children. They knew something was very wrong. Alina led them through the burning streets. She moved differently now. Her body remembered patterns it had practiced 10,000 times. She checked corners before crossing. She listened for the specific sound of Valdrin pulse rifles charging. She kept her children in her shadow at all times. They almost made it. The Valdrin squad appeared from a side street. 6 soldiers led by an officer with gold markings on his armor. They saw Alina and her children immediately. "Humans," the officer said in badly accented English, "you will come with us. Resistance means death." Alina pushed her children behind her. "Run," she whispered. "Get to the shelter." "Mom, we can't leave you." "Run." The Valdrin officer raised his weapon. Alina moved. She crossed the distance between them in less than a second. Her hand closed around his throat before he could fire. She twisted, using his body as a shield against the other soldiers. Her other hand took his sidearm from his belt. She Fired 3 times, 3 soldiers fell. The remaining 2 soldiers stared in shock. They had never seen a human move. Like that, they had never seen anyone move like that. Elena killed them both. Before they recovered, she turned to check on her children. They were still there, frozen in place, staring at her. With wide eyes, they had not run. They had watched their mother kill 6 enemy soldiers in less than 5 seconds. I told you to run, Elena said. Mom, Maya whispered. How did you more Valdrin? Were coming. Elena could hear their boots on the pavement, their officers shouting orders, dozens of them maybe. Hundreds. She couldn't fight them all. Not while protecting her children. Go, she said. The shelter is 2 blocks north. I'll hold them here. We won't leave you, Theo said. You will. Elena's voice broke slightly. Please, I need you to be safe. That's all that matters. The first wave of Valdrin came around the corner. Elena charged to meet them. Maya and Theo watched in horror as their mother fought. She was fast and brutal and completely without mercy. Soldiers fell around her like leaves in a storm, but there were too many for everyone. She killed 3 more appeared. A pulse blast caught Elena in the shoulder. She staggered but kept fighting. Another hit her leg. She fell to one knee but continued firing until her weapon was empty. Then she used her hands. The Valdrin finally brought her down with sheer numbers. A dozen soldiers piled onto her, pinning her to the ground. Elena was still struggling when a shock weapon touched her spine, and her body went limp. The last thing she saw before losing consciousness was her children being dragged away by Valdrin soldiers. Maya was screaming. Theo was fighting uselessly against grips too strong to break. Elena tried to call out to them, but her voice wouldn't work. Then everything went dark. The Valdrin took 47 children from New Thessaly that day. They loaded them onto transports and flew them off-world before any human response could arrive. It was a quick, efficient operation, the kind of raid the hegemony had been conducting along human borders for months, testing, pushing, seeing what they could get away with. Commander Voreth stood on the bridge of his flagship and watched New Thessaly shrink in the view screen. The operation had been a success. The children would be useful bargaining chips when negotiating with Earth. Perhaps they could trade them for territorial concessions. Perhaps they could use them to force humanity into accepting Valdrin expansion. Either way, they were valuable. Commander, his intelligence officer, said, "We have a problem." Voreth turned. What kind of problem? One of the adult humans, the woman who killed Sergeant Catherine and his squad. The officer pulled up a file on his display. We ran her identification through our databases. Most of her records are sealed by human military classification. We can't access them. Then how is this a problem? Because of what we could access. Officer's compound eyes flickered with something that might have been fear. Her name is Elena Chen. The name triggered an automatic alert in our historical archives. Voreth felt the first cold touch of unease. Show me. The officer transmitted a file to the main view screen. It was old footage, grainy and damaged. The timestamp showed it was 16 years old. On screen, a human woman stood atop a hill. She was covered in blood, little of it her own. Around her lay the bodies of hundreds of Valdrin soldiers. Behind her, the burning ruins of what had once been the hegemony's greatest fortress. The battle Of Kareth Prime, the worst defeat in Valdrin history. That's her, the officer said quietly. Alina Chen, she was the commanding general of human forces at Kareth Prime. She killed 40,000 of our soldiers in 6 days. She broke the back of our entire Third Fleet. She's the reason we signed the peace treaty. Voreth stared at the screen. The woman in the footage was younger, harder, wrapped in combat armor and carrying weapons, but the face was the same, the eyes were the same. She retired 15 years ago, the officer continued, disappeared completely. Our intelligence assumed she was dead, but she was living on New Thessaly under a false identity and commander. The officer paused. The children we took, 2 of them are her twins. Silence filled the bridge. Voreth's second in command spoke first. We should release them immediately before she what? Voreth asked, but his voice was less steady than before. She's one woman, one old retired woman, on a backwater colony with no military resources. What can she possibly do? At Kareth Prime she started with nothing too, the officer said. A single battalion against our entire fortress network. Everyone said it was impossible. She made it possible. Voreth turned away from the screen. Set course for Valdrin Prime, maximum speed. I want those children secured in a high-security facility within 48 hours. And I want our defenses on full alert. All of them. Commander, shouldn't we inform the High Council? I'll inform them personally. Voreth stared out at the stars, toward the distant human territories. They need to understand what we may have just started. On New Thessaly, Alina Chen woke up in a hospital bed. Her shoulder was bandaged. Her leg was wrapped in a healing cast. Medical machines beeped softly around her. A doctor stood over her. You're lucky to be alive, he said. Valdrin left you for dead by the time we found you, my children, Alina said. Her voice was a dry whisper. The doctor's face fell. I'm sorry they took them. They took all the children. They're already off-world, we think. They're being transported to Valdrin Prime. Alina closed her eyes. For a long moment she was silent, then she opened her eyes again, and the doctor took a step backward because something had changed in the woman on the bed. Something cold and old and terrifying had woken up behind her eyes. I need a communication terminal, Alina said. Secure channel, military encryption. Ma'am, you need rest, your injuries. Now. An hour later, Alina sat alone with a holographic display. She entered a code she hadn't used in 15 years, a code she had hoped never to use again. The face that appeared on the screen was older than she remembered. Admiral James O'Connell, her former second-in-command, now the head of Human Strategic Command. Ghost, he said softly, using her old call sign. I thought you were dead. So did the Valdrin. Alina's voice was steady. They just took my children, James. They took them to their home world. O'Connell was quiet for a moment, then he nodded slowly. What do you need? Everyone, Alina said, everyone who still remembers, everyone who owes me, everyone who ever served under me and wondered what happened to their old commander. Her eyes were hard as stone. The Valdrin forgot why they signed that peace treaty. I'm going to remind them. The ghost of Kareth Prime was coming home, and the galaxy would tremble. The detention facility on Valdrin Prime was not a prison. That was what the guards kept saying. It was a temporary housing center for diplomatic guests. The walls were clean. The food was acceptable. The beds were soft enough, but the doors were locked. The windows had bars and armed soldiers watched every corridor. Maya Chen sat on her bed and stared at those bars. 3 weeks had passed since the raid on New Thessaly. 3 weeks since she watched her mother fight like something out of a nightmare. 3 weeks since the Valdrin stunned her and Theo and dragged them onto a ship bound for the heart of enemy territory. Their mother was dead. That was what the Valdrin told them. She died fighting. Her body was left on New Thessaly. They should accept this and cooperate with their hosts. Maya did not believe a single word. The door to her room opened. 2 Valdrin soldiers entered, followed by an officer with silver markings on his armor. He was tall even for his species, and his compound eyes studied Maya like she was an interesting specimen. "You will come with us," he said. "Your brother is waiting." They led her through clean corridors to an interrogation room. Theo was already there, sitting at a metal table. He looked tired but unharmed. When he saw Maya, some of the tension left his shoulders. The officer sat across from them. "I am called Investigator Krath. I have questions about your mother." "She's dead," Maya said flatly. "You killed her." "Perhaps, but before she died she killed 11 of our soldiers with her bare hands. This is unusual for a colonial administrator." Krath's voice was calm, almost friendly. "We ran her identification through our archives. Most of her file is sealed. But what we found was very interesting." He placed a small device on the table. A holographic image appeared above it. Maya's breath caught in her throat. It was their mother, younger, harder, wearing blood-stained combat armor. She stood on a hill surrounded by destruction. Behind her, flames consumed what looked like an entire city. "This was taken 16 years ago," Krath said, "at a place called Kareth Prime. Perhaps you have heard of it." Maya had. Everyone had. It was taught in history classes across human space. The decisive battle that ended the Second Valdrin War, the battle that broke the hegemony's military power for a generation. "Your mother was the commanding general," Krath continued. "She led the human forces that killed 40,000 Valdrin soldiers. She personally destroyed our greatest fortress. She is the reason we lost the war." Theo spoke for the first time. "That's not possible. Our mom was an administrator. She worked in an office." She. He trailed off. They both remembered watching her fight. The impossible speed, the brutal precision, the way she had moved through enemy soldiers like water through sand. "She lied to you," Krath said simply. "For your entire lives she pretended to be something she was not. The question is, what else did she hide? What did she teach you? What secrets did she share?" "Nothing," Maya said. "We didn't know anything about this." "I believe you." Krath leaned back in his chair. "But my superiors require certainty. We will continue these conversations until we have it." The interrogations continued for days. Always the same questions, always the same officers with their calm voices and patient eyes. "What did Alina tell you about the war? What did she teach you about fighting? Did she have contact with military personnel? Did she give you codes, passwords, hidden instructions?" Maya and Thea told the truth every time. They knew nothing. Their mother had been a mystery wrapped in an ordinary life. At night, lying awake in their separate cells, both twins thought the same. Thought, who was Alina Chen really? What else had she hidden from them? And the biggest question of all, was she really dead, far from Valdrin Prime in a secure bunker beneath the surface of Earth's moon? Alina Chen was very much alive. She stood before a holographic map of Valdrin space. Red dots marked military installations, fleet positions, defensive networks. Blue lines traced supply routes and communication channels. It was the most complete map of enemy territory that human intelligence had ever assembled. 11 people stood with her, all of them old, all of them scarred, all of them dangerous. Admiral James O'Connell commanded Human Strategic Command. General Sarah Webb controlled the Marine Corps. Director Michael Torres ran intelligence operations, and 8 others, each holding significant power within humanity's military structure. They were the survivors of Alina's old command staff, the veterans of Kara Prime, the people who had followed her into hell and walked out the other side. This is not a military operation, Alina said. Her voice was quiet but carried absolute authority. There are no official orders, no government sanction. If this goes wrong, you will all be court-martialed. Your careers will end. You may spend the rest of your lives in prison. With respect, General, Admiral O'Connell said, we didn't come here to listen to warnings. We came because you called. What do you need? Alina turned back to the map. Valdrin think I'm dead. They took my children to their home world because they believe they're safe there. They're wronged. She touched the display and a detailed image of Valdrin Prime appeared. This is the most heavily defended planet in the hegemony. Orbital weapons platforms, ground-based interceptors, 3 standing fleets, a population of 12 billion. Sounds like impossible odds, General Webb said. It does. Alina's eyes were cold and focused. At Kareth Prime, I had 1 battalion against their entire fortress network. Everyone said that was impossible too. What's the plan? Director Torres asked. We don't attack them directly. We can't win a straight fight against their home world defenses. But we don't need to. Alina pulled up a new display showing the Valdrin border territories. We start by making them afraid. She pointed to a series of outposts along the human Valdrin frontier. These are their forward listening posts, early warning stations, intelligence gathering facilities. For the next month we destroy them quietly, completely, without leaving any survivors. They'll know someone is attacking them, O'Connell said. Yes, but they won't know who, they won't know how, and they won't know why. Alina smiled, but there was no warmth in it. Fear is a weapon, James. The Valdrin have spent 16 years forgetting what happened at Kareth Prime. They've convinced themselves that was a historical accident, a lucky break for humanity. I'm going to remind them what fear feels like. The plan was elegant in its cruelty. Small teams of human operatives would strike across Valdrin space. They would kill without witnesses. They would destroy without leaving evidence. The Valdrin would find their outposts ruined and their soldiers dead, with no explanation of what had happened, and then the messages would start. We leave 1 word at every site, Alina said. Just 1 word. written where they can't miss it. What word? Tors asked Kareth. The room was silent. Everyone there understood the psychological impact that word would have on the Valdrin military. It was the name of their greatest shame. The battle that haunted their officers. Nightmares to see it appearing at destruction sites across their territory. Would be devastating. While we keep them distracted at the borders, Alina continued, I'll be moving toward their home world, a small team, ships that can avoid detection. When the moment is right, we'll extract the children and any other human prisoners. And if they catch you, Webb asked. They won't, but if they do. Alina paused. I've been preparing for this possibility for 15 years. Since the day my children were born. I always knew the Valdrin might come for me eventually. I just never imagined they would be stupid enough to take my family. The planning session continued for hours. Resources were allocated. Personnel were chosen. Timing was coordinated. By the time they finished, the operation was ready to launch. As the others filed out, Admiral Okonkwo lingered behind. Alina, he said quietly, are you sure about this? The diplomatic channels will fail. Alina interrupted. I know how the Valduran think. They see this raid as a victory. They believe humanity has grown soft. During the peace years, they'll use the hostages as leverage to demand concessions. By the time diplomacy fails, my children could be dead. And if we start this campaign, we might restart the war. Maybe. Alina turned to face her old friend, but I'm betting on something else. The Valduran leadership is arrogant, but they're not stupid. When they realize who they've angered, when they understand that I'm coming for them, they'll have a choice. They can fight a war they know they'll lose, or they can give me my children back and pretend this never happened. That's a dangerous bet. Everything worth doing is dangerous. Alina's voice softened slightly. I spent 15 years trying to be normal. James, trying to give my children a life far from war and death and everything I used to be, and it wasn't enough. The galaxy found them anyway. She looked at the holographic image of Valduran Prime. Somewhere on that world, her children were being held captive. Somewhere on that world, Valduran officers were questioning them about their mother. I'm going to get them back, she said. And I'm going to make sure the Valduran never forget the lesson I teach them. On Valduran Prime, High Counselor Zethran sat in his chambers and reviewed the day's intelligence reports. His advisors had warned him about the human children, about their dangerous mother. But Zethran had dismissed their concerns. Alina Chi was old news, relic of a war that ended 16 years ago. His communication console chimed, an urgent message from the border territories. Zethran opened it with mild irritation. The report made his blood run cold. 3 listening posts destroyed in the last 12 hours, 24 soldiers dead, no witnesses, no evidence of attacking ships, but at each site the same word was found written in Valduran blood on the walls. Kareth. Zethran stared at the word for a long moment, then he called for his military commanders. An emergency session. Highest priority, the ghost of Kareth was not dead after all, and she was coming. Fear spread through the Valduran hegemony like a plague. For 6 weeks the attacks continued. Military outposts burned, intelligence stations went dark. Supply convoys vanished without a trace. And always, everywhere, the same word. Appeared in the wreckage, Karath. The Valduran High Council met in emergency session every day. There, intelligence services worked around the clock trying to find any clue about who was responsible. They found nothing. Attackers were ghosts. They struck without warning and disappeared without evidence. General Voresk, commander of the Hegemony Second Fleet, stood before the council and delivered his report with visible fear in his compound eyes. 17 installations destroyed in the past 2 weeks, 114 personnel killed, no survivors, no sensor readings, no identification of enemy forces. He paused. This morning we received reports that Admiral Kethrin has resigned his command. Resigned, High Counselor Zethrin demanded. He commands our border defense fleet. He cannot simply resign. He can, and he did. Voresk's voice dropped. Last night, someone entered his personal quarters on his flagship. His entire security detail was found unconscious. The word Karath was written on his bedroom wall. Nothing was stolen. No one was harmed, but the message was clear. The council chamber erupted in worried murmurs. If the enemy could reach an admiral on his own ship, no one was safe. This is one woman, Zethrin insisted, one old human with no army and no fleet. How is she doing this? We don't know. Voresk spread his four hands in helpless confusion. Our intelligence suggests she may have recruited former military personnel who served under her during the war. Veterans who remain loyal to her personally rather than to the human government. Then contact the human government. Demand they stop her. We tried. They claim they have no knowledge of these attacks. They say Alina Chi has been listed as deceased for 15 years. Voresk hesitated. Either they are lying or she is operating completely outside their control. Zethrin slammed his fist against his chair. Then find her, kill her. I don't care how many resources it takes. That's the problem, Counselor. Voresk's voice was barely a whisper now. We've been trying. We've deployed our best intelligence operatives, our most skilled hunters. 3 of them are dead. The others have requested to be reassigned. Cowards, perhaps, but they are alive. The ones who kept pursuing her are not. The fear in the room was so thick it was almost visible. These were the rulers of an interstellar empire. They commanded billions of soldiers and thousands of warships, and they were afraid of one woman because they remembered. All of them were old enough to remember the war. They remembered the reports from Karath Prime. They remembered how one human general had torn through their defenses like they were made of paper. They remembered the shame of surrender. And now she was back in the detention facility on Valduran Prime. Maya and Theo felt the change in their captors. The guards who had once been calm and professional now seemed nervous. They jumped at shadows. They spoke in hushed whispers when they thought the prisoners couldn't hear. The interrogations became more intense. Investigator Krath visited them daily, now asking the same questions with increasing urgency. What did your mother teach you? What did she tell you about her plans? Does she have allies on Valduran Prime? We don't know anything, Theo said for the 100th time. We've told you everything. We didn't even know she was a soldier. Krath stared at him for a long moment. His compound eyes were impossible to read, but something in his posture suggested frustration. Your mother is causing significant problems for the hegemony, he said. Finally, our outposts are burning. Our officers are resigning in fear. The word Kareth has become something our soldiers whisper like a curse. Good, Maya said quietly. Krath turned his attention to her. You approve of what she is doing. She's coming for us. Maya's voice was steady despite her fear. Whatever else she did, whatever she hid from us, she's coming for us, and there's nothing you can do to stop her. We have an entire planet's defenses. Millions of soldiers, the most powerful fleet in the quadrant. You had all of that at Kareth Prime too. Maya allowed herself a small smile. How did that work out for you? Krath had no answer. Far across Valderan space, Alina Chi was closing the trap. She traveled on a small civilian transport modified with military-grade sensors and weapons hidden beneath its ordinary hull. 3 other operatives accompanied her. All former soldiers. All veterans of her old campaigns. All absolutely loyal. For 6 weeks, she had been moving closer to Valderan Prime while her teams created chaos at the borders. Every attack was designed to draw attention outward, away from the heart of the hegemony. Every act of destruction made the Valderan focus on their perimeter defenses. Now she was inside their security zone, moving through their patrol routes, approaching their homeworld. We're receiving reports from the strike teams, her communications officer said. Admiral Vorisk's command station was hit last night. He's demanding reassignment to the rear areas. Alina nodded. Vorisk had commanded forces against her at Kareth Prime. She remembered him as a competent officer. With more caution than courage, his fear would spread to others. Any changes to Valderan Prime's defensive posture? They've reinforced the orbital platforms, increased patrol frequencies, but they're stretched thin because of the border attacks. The officer checked her displays. There's a gap in their coverage. 12 hours from now, the patrol schedules will create a window. 14 minutes with minimal sensor coverage on the approach vector. That's our window. Alina pulled up the tactical display. Once we're past the orbital defenses, we need to reach the surface undetected. The children are being held in a maximum security facility in the capital city. A maximum security facility on the most heavily defended planet in the hegemony, her tactical officer observed, with millions of soldiers between us and the target. Yes. Alina's voice was calm. But I've been studying the facilities systems for 2 weeks. Their security is designed to keep prisoners in, not to stop infiltration from outside. Their arrogance is their weakness, and once we get the children, how do we get out? Alina smiled. It was not a pleasant expression. We won't need to fight our way out. By the time we reach my children, the Valderan will be begging us to leave. The plan was insane. Everyone knew it. 4 people against an entire planet. But they had all followed Alina into impossible situations before. They had seen her turn certain defeat into stunning victory. They trusted her completely. There's something else, the communications officer said. A message from Admiral Okonkwo. He says the human government is becoming suspicious. There's pressure to open diplomatic channels with the Valderan. Tell him to delay as long as possible. Diplomacy will fail. The Valderan don't respond to words, they respond to fear and power. Elena closed her eyes briefly. And I'm about to give them both. That night as their ship entered the outer reaches of the Valdrin home system, Elena allowed herself to think about her children. She wondered if they hated her now. She had lied to them their entire lives. She had hidden the blood on her hands beneath a mask of ordinary domesticity. But the lie had been necessary. She wanted them to grow up free from the shadow of what she had done, free from the knowledge that their mother had killed more beings than they could possibly imagine, free from the expectation that they would follow in her footsteps. The galaxy had taken that freedom from them. The Valdrin had dragged her children into her world of violence and fear. Now Elena would do what she did best. She would get them back, and she would make their captors pay. Governor Marith of the Valdrin border province was having a very bad month. 3 of his installations had been destroyed. His best officers were requesting transfers, and the High Council blamed him personally for failing to stop the attacks. When his security chief reported that they had captured a human infiltrator, Marith's spirits lifted considerably. Finally, something was going right. He rushed to the detention center to oversee the interrogation personally. The prisoner was a woman, middle-aged, with short gray hair and calm eyes. She sat in the restraint chair without struggling, watching her captors with an expression that seemed almost amused. "So, Marith," said, standing over her, "one of the famous ghost operatives, you'll tell us everything you know about her operations." The woman smiled. "I'm not one of her operatives." "Governor, then who are you?" "My name is Elena Chen." The woman's smile widened. "I'm the ghost." Marith froze. For a moment he couldn't speak. This was impossible. The ghost of Kareth was a legend, a demon from Valdrin. Nightmares. She couldn't simply walk into one of his facilities and allow herself to be captured. "You're lying," he managed. "Check your database, run my genetic profile. I'll wait." His officers did exactly that. Results came back in seconds, a perfect match for the classified files on Elena Chen. The most wanted human in Valdrin space was sitting in his restraint chair, looking completely relaxed. "Why?" Marith asked. "Why would you let yourself be captured?" "Because I wanted to talk to you." Elena's calm eyes met his. "Your security at this facility is excellent, Governor, much better than your intelligence network. That's why I chose to come here personally, to talk, to deliver a message." Elena leaned forward slightly, as much as the restraints would allow. "Tell your High Council that I'm coming to Valdrin Prime. Tell them I'm going to take my children back, and tell them." She paused, and something changed in her expression. Something cold and terrible looked out through her eyes. "Tell them that what happened to Kareth Prime can happen again, anywhere, anytime, as long as they hold my children. No one in the hegemony is safe." Marith should have felt triumphant. He had captured the enemy's greatest asset. Instead, he felt a deep primal fear crawling up his spine. "You're in our custody now," he said. But his voice wavered. "You're not positioned to make threats." "Am I in your custody?" Elena asked. "Are you sure about that?" The lights went out. In the sudden darkness, Marith heard sounds, thuds, cries, the crash of bodies hitting the floor. When the emergency lights flickered on 3 seconds later, every guard in the room was unconscious. Alina Chen stood in the center of the room, free of her restraints. 3 figures in black tactical gear stood. With her, they had appeared from nowhere. "Your security is excellent," Alina said. "Again, but not excellent enough." She walked toward the door, then paused and looked back at Marith. "Deliver my message, Governor. The High Council has 24 hours to release my children. After that." She didn't finish the sentence. She didn't need to. Marith stood alone among his fallen guards, trembling. In that moment, he understood something that the Valdran leadership had forgotten over 16 years of peace. Humans were not weak. Humans were not soft. They had simply been waiting for a reason to remind the galaxy what they truly were, and now one of them had that reason. Marith ran to his communication console. He had a message to deliver. The High Council of the Valdran Hegemony received Governor Marith's message within the hour. They watched the security footage in stunned silence. Alina Chen, captured and restrained, sitting calmly in an interrogation chair. The lights going dark. 3 seconds of chaos, and then nothing but unconscious guards in an empty room. The ghost of Kareth had walked into a maximum security facility, allowed herself to be captured, delivered a threat, and vanished. "This is a declaration of war, General," Vorik said. "No," High Counselor Zethrin replied, his voice tired. "This is a demonstration. She wanted us to see what she could do. She wanted us to know that our security means nothing to her." "Then what do we do?" Zethrin stared at the frozen image on the screen, Alina Chen's face calm and certain, looking directly at the camera, as if she knew he would be watching. "We have her children," he said finally. "That's our leverage. She won't do anything that risks their lives. With respect, Counselor, she just infiltrated a secure facility alone. She is clearly willing to take extreme risks. Then we make sure she understands the consequences." Zethrin stood. "Triple the guard on the detention facility. Move the children to the most secure location on the planet, and send word to every news outlet in the hegemony. If any human forces approach Valdran Prime, the hostages will be executed." It was a brutal move, a desperate move. But Zethrin had no other options. Alina Chen had shown that conventional security couldn't stop her. The only weapon he had left was the lives of her children. 12 hours later, everything fell apart. The attacks began at midnight, Valdran Prime Standard Time. Across the planet, power stations went dark, communication networks crashed. Orbital defense platforms reported massive system failures. It was as if an invisible hand was reaching into the heart of Valdran civilization and switching it off. "What's happening?" Zethrin demanded, rushing to the emergency command center. "We're under attack," his military advisor reported, panic in his voice. "But we can't identify the enemy. There are no ships in orbit, no ground forces detected. Someone is hacking our systems remotely. That's impossible. Our security protocols are being bypassed completely." The advisor pulled up displays showing cascading failures across the planet. "Someone has spent months mapping our infrastructure. They know exactly where every weakness is. They're not destroying anything, just disabling it." Zethrin watched the displays with growing horror. The orbital weapons platforms were offline, the ground-based interceptors were frozen. The communication networks that coordinated planetary defense were dead. In one night, Alina Chen had rendered the most powerful planet in the hegemony completely defenseless, and then the message arrived. It appeared on every screen on the planet, broadcast through emergency channels that should have been impossible to access. Alina Chen's face transmitted from somewhere on the surface, looking directly at the camera. "High Counselor," she said, her voice calm and cold, "your 24 hours are up. Your defenses are down. Your military cannot protect you. You have one chance to end this peacefully. Release my children and every other human prisoner in your custody. Do this now, and I will leave. Refuse, and you will learn why your people called me the Ghost." The transmission cut to static. Zethrin turned to his advisors. Find her now." But before they could respond, another report came in: explosions at the primary detention facility. The building where his hostages were held was under attack. Alina moved through the detention facility like death itself. She was not alone. Her 3 operatives advanced, with her covering angles, neutralizing guards, opening paths. But Alina was the spearhead. Every Valdrin who stood in her way went down in seconds. She was 62 years old. She had been retired for 15 years. But her body remembered everything, every combat technique she had ever learned, every lesson written in blood during decades of warfare. The Valdrin thought age had weakened her. They were wrong. Age had given her patience, experience had given her wisdom, and fury had given her strength beyond anything she had possessed in her youth. The guards at the cell block made a last stand, 20 soldiers with pulse rifles, defending the corridor that led to the human prisoners they had orders to hold. At any cost, they lasted 8 seconds. Alina stepped over their bodies and approached the locked cells. Her team moved ahead, securing the corridor and preparing the extraction route. She barely noticed them. Her entire focus was on the door in front of her. She touched the lock panel. Her hacking device cycled through security codes. In milliseconds, the door slid open. Maya and Theo Chen stood in the center of the cell, holding each other protectively. They had heard the fighting, they had heard the guards fall, and now they watched their mother step through the doorway, covered in the blood of their captors, looking like something out of a nightmare. "Mom," Maya whispered. Alina crossed the room in 3 strides and pulled both children into her arms. For a moment, just a moment, she was not a general or a killer or ghost. She was just a mother holding her children. "I'm here," she said, her voice cracking. "I'm here, you're safe now." Theo was crying. "We thought you were dead, they told us. You were dead." "I know. I'm sorry." Alina pulled back slightly, looking at both of them with fierce intensity. "We need to move. Can you walk? Are you injured?" "We're okay," Maya said, "just scared." "Good, stay behind me. Do exactly what I say." Alina's combat calm returned, but softer, now tempered by love. "We're going home." The extraction was almost clean, almost. They reached the rooftop landing pad, where Alina's shuttle waited, hidden by stealth systems that even Valdrin sensors couldn't detect. The other human prisoners, 45 children and a dozen adults, were already boarding, guided by Alina's operatives, but Valdrin reinforcements were arriving. Ground Vehicles surrounded the facility. Soldiers poured out, taking positions around the perimeter. In the distance, the distinctive shape of a Valdran gunship appeared on the horizon. "We're surrounded," her tactical officer reported. "They've got enough firepower to destroy our shuttle before we reach orbit." Elena looked at the approaching forces. Hundreds of soldiers, heavy weapons, air support. Under normal circumstances, it would be an impossible situation. These were not normal circumstances. She activated her communication device. Admiral Okonkwo now in orbit high above Valdran Prime space itself seemed to tear open. 17 human warships emerged from hyperspace, their weapons already powered and targeting the planet's disabled defense systems. They were not a battle fleet, they were veteran ships, old cruisers and frigates that should have been decommissioned years ago. They were crewed by retired soldiers who had no official authorization to be there, but their weapons were real. Their targeting was precise, and their commander was Elena Chen. "This is Admiral James Okonkwo," a voice broadcast across all Valdran frequencies. "We have weapons locks on your primary government buildings, your military headquarters, and your industrial centers. We are prepared to fire on the command of General Elena Chen. Hi, Counselor Zethrin. I suggest you listen very carefully to what she has to say." On the rooftop, Elena took a communication device from her tactical officer. "Counselor Zethrin, are you receiving this?" There was a long pause, then Zethrin's voice came through, tired and defeated. "I'm here. Your defenses are down. My fleet has your cities targeted. I have my children." Elena looked at Meyer and Theo, standing close together beside the shuttle. "You have lost. The question now is how badly you want to lose. If you fire on our cities, millions will die. You'll be a war criminal." "Yes." Elena's voice was cold as space. "I will, but my children will be safe, and your civilization will be ashes. Is that what you want?" Silence. Somewhere in the Valdran capital, Zethrin was making the hardest decision of his life. Elena could almost feel his desperation, his fear, his understanding that he had no good options left. "What do you want?" he asked finally. "I want to leave with every human prisoner without interference." Elena paused. "And I want you to remember this day. Remember that I had you at my mercy. Remember that I could have destroyed everything you built. And what happens after you leave?" Elena looked at the ships in orbit, at the terrified soldiers surrounding the facility, at her children watching her with wide eyes. She thought about Kareth Prime, about the 40,000 Valdran she had killed there, about the blood that had stained her hands for so long. She thought about Meyer and Theo and the life she had wanted for them, the peaceful life, the lie that couldn't last. "What happens next is up to you, Counselor." Her voice softened slightly. "I don't want another war. I never wanted the first one, but I will do whatever is necessary to protect my family. Remember that when you're deciding how to respond to this day." Another long pause. Then Zethrin spoke, his voice filled with bitter resignation. "Go, take your people and go. No one will stop you." The Valdran soldiers lowered their weapons. The gunship veered away. Path to the shuttle was clear. Elena watched her children board the shuttle, watched the other prisoners strap in, watched her operatives secure the hatch. She was the last to enter, standing in the doorway for one final moment. She had won. She had come to the heart of enemy territory, broken their defenses, taken back what they stole and left them helpless to stop her. It was a complete victory. But standing there looking at the devastation she had caused, Alina felt no triumph, only exhaustion, only the weight of all the years and all the blood that had led to this moment. The shuttle's engines fired. They rose into the sky toward the waiting fleet, toward home. Below them, the Valdran hegemony began. The slow process of understanding what had just happened to them. They had taken the children of a retired general. They had awakened something that should have stayed asleep, and they had learned once again why humanity was never to be underestimated. The journey home took 3 days. Alina's fleet traveled through the empty spaces between stars, avoiding Valdran patrol routes, moving toward human territory with their precious cargo of rescued prisoners. On the flagship, medical teams worked around the clock, checking the health of every captive, treating injuries both physical and psychological. Maya and Theo spent most of the journey in their mother's quarters, for the first day they barely spoke. The shock of everything they had witnessed was too fresh, too raw. But slowly, as the hours passed, the questions began. "Why didn't you tell us?" Maya asked on the second night. She sat across from her mother in the small cabin, wrapped in a blanket, looking younger than her 16 years. Alina took a long time to answer. "Because I wanted you to have a choice. If you knew who I was, what I had done, you would have grown up in that shadow. People would have expected you to be soldiers like me. Politicians would have watched you. Enemies would have targeted you." She paused. "I wanted you to be free." "But we weren't free," Theo said quietly. "They took us anyway." "I know. I thought I had hidden well enough. I thought the peace would hold." Alina's voice carried deep sadness. "I was wrong. I'm sorry." The three of them sat in silence for a while. Outside the viewport, stars drifted past like distant memories. "Mom," Maya said finally, "at the detention facility, when you came for us, I saw what you did to those guards." "Yes." "You killed them, a lot of them." "Yes." Alina met her daughter's eyes without flinching. "I did." "Does it bother you?" Alina considered the question carefully. It deserved an honest answer. It used to. "When I was young, every death weighed on me. I had nightmares. I questioned whether I was doing the right thing." She exhaled slowly. "Now I've accepted what I am. I'm a weapon, a very effective one. When I'm needed, I do what needs to be done. When I'm not needed, I try to be something else. Like a colonial administrator, like a mother." Alina reached out and took Maya's hand. "That was always the most important job, the one I wanted to do well. Everything else, the battles, the glory, the ghost of Kareth, none of it matters compared to you and your brother." Theo moved closer, sitting beside his sister. "Are you going to disappear again after this? I mean, will you go back to being someone else?" "I don't know if I can." Alina looked at both her children with love and sorrow. "The Valdran know I'm alive now. The human government knows what I did. There may be consequences. I may have to answer for leading an unauthorized military operation. They can't arrest you," Maya said fiercely. "You saved us. You saved everyone. The law doesn't always care about outcomes. I broke rules important ones. Elena smiled slightly, but let's worry about that when we get home. For now, I just want to enjoy having you both safe. The fleet reached human space on the third day. They were met by official military vessels, a reception that could have been hostile given the circumstances. Elena prepared herself for arrest, for court-martial, for the end of everything she had built. Instead, Admiral Okonkwo's voice came through the communication system. General Chen, Human Strategic Command, has reviewed your operation. Given the successful rescue of all hostages and the absence of any civilian casualties, we've decided to classify the entire mission as a training exercise. Congratulations on the successful conclusion of your exercise, General. Elena stared at the communication console. James, that's the most transparent fiction I've ever heard. I know, but it's the fiction everyone has agreed to believe. Okonkwo's voice carried a hint of amusement. The civilian government doesn't want to explain why a retired general waged a one-woman war against the Valdrin hegemony. The military doesn't want to admit they couldn't control their own veterans. And the Valdrin. He paused. The Valdrin definitely don't want to admit what happened. What about diplomatic consequences? That's the interesting part. The Valdrin have requested formal peace negotiations, real negotiations this time. They're offering territorial concessions, reparations for the border raids, and a complete end to their expansion policy. Okonkwo's voice grew more serious. You scared them. Elena, not just their military, their entire government. They're looking at their defenses and realizing how vulnerable they really are. They don't want to find out what would happen if humanity actually decided to fight. Elena thought about High Counselor Zethran's voice, tired and defeated, as he ordered his soldiers to stand down. She thought about the fear in the Valdrin guard's eyes as she moved through the detention facility. She had not set out to remake the galaxy. She had only wanted her children back. But wars begin and end for strain reason. Sometimes the fate of civilization is decided by the love of a mother for her children. The weeks that followed were a whirlwind of change. Elena refused all official positions, all offers of command, all attempts to draw her back into military service. She had done what she needed to do. Now she wanted only to rest. The Valdrin peace negotiations proceeded with remarkable speed. The hegemony offered everything they had once refused to consider: withdrawal from contested territories, compensation for their aggression, binding agreements to prevent future expansion. Human diplomats could hardly believe their good fortune. Behind closed doors, everyone knew the truth. The Valdrin were not negotiating out of generosity. They were negotiating out of fear. The ghost of Karath had demonstrated that their mighty empire was not as strong as they believed. One woman with a handful of allies had brought them to their knees. If one woman could do that, what could all of humanity do? Maya Chen emerged from the crisis with a new sense of purpose. She had seen the worst of interstellar politics, the kidnappings, the brutality, the use of children as pawns in diplomatic games. She had also seen the power of understanding, of knowing your enemy, of finding weaknesses that weapons could not touch. I want to study diplomacy, she told her mother 6 months after their rescue. I want to help prevent situations like what happened to us. Maybe if humans and Valdrin understood each other better, there wouldn't need to be people like you. Elena smiled at that. The galaxy will always need people like me, but it also needs people like you. People who try to make sure we're never needed. Theo found a different path. The violence he had witnessed left deep marks, but not the ones his mother feared. He became determined to teach others what he had learned, that peace was precious, that war left scars that never fully healed, that understanding was always better than destruction. He became a teacher, working with young people on frontier colonies, helping them understand the galaxy's history and the importance of preventing its mistakes from repeating. Elena watched both her children grow with pride and wonder. They had taken the worst experience of their young lives and transformed it into purpose. They had not been broken by what happened, they had been shaped by it. Years passed, the galaxy slowly healed from the fear of those terrible weeks. The Valdrin hegemony underwent transformation. The aggressive faction that had pushed for expansion was completely discredited. New leaders emerged, ones who remembered the humiliation of Valdrin Prime and chose a different path. Trade agreements replaced territorial demands. Cultural exchanges replaced hostage raids. Slowly, carefully, two civilizations that had been enemies began learning to be neighbors. It wasn't perfect. Old hatreds ran deep. There were incidents, tensions, moments when war seemed possible again. But each time calmer heads prevailed. Each time someone remembered what the ghost of Karath had demonstrated, that military might was not the only form of power, and that even the strongest empire could be brought low by underestimating their enemies. On New Thessaly, Elena Chen lived quietly. The colony had been rebuilt after the raid. New families had moved in. Scars of that terrible day had faded from the buildings, if not from the memories of those who had been there. Elena tended her garden, filed administrative reports, and watched the ships come and go from the colonies. Small spaceport, sometimes those ships were human, sometimes increasingly they were Valdrin trading vessels, cultural delegations, tourists curious about the world where the ghost had hidden for so long. She never hid from them, she never sought them out either. She was simply there, a living reminder of what humanity could become when pushed too far, and what they chose to become instead. On a clear evening, years after the rescue, Elena sat on her porch and watched a Valdrin trading ship descend toward the spaceport. Her communication device chimed with a message from Maya, reporting on the latest diplomatic breakthrough. In the background, she could hear Theo's students laughing at some joke he had made. Her children were safe. They were happy. They were making the galaxy better in their own ways. That was all she had ever wanted. Young Valdrin, barely more than a child, approached her porch hesitantly. He was part of a cultural exchange group visiting the colony. His compound eyes were wide with nervous curiosity. "Excuse me," he said in careful, accented English, Are you really her, the ghost of Karath?" Elena considered the question. She thought about all the blood on her hands, all the lives she had taken, all the fear she had caused. She thought about her children and the future they were building. I was, she said finally, once a long time ago. Why did you stop after what you did to us? You could have destroyed the hegemony. You could have ruled everything. Elena looked at the young Valdrin for a long moment. Then she smiled, not the cold smile of a warrior, but the warm smile of a grandmother, of a teacher, of someone who had learned hard lessons and wanted others to learn them easier. Because winning isn't about destroying your enemies, she said, it's about creating a galaxy where your children and their children don't have to fight. I could have burned the hegemony to ashes, but then what? More war, more hate, more children growing up learning to kill. She gestured at the peaceful colony around them, at the Valdrin ship landing safely in a human spaceport, at the future that was slowly, painfully being built. This is harder than war, she said. This takes longer, but this is the only victory that matters. The young Valdrin thought about her words for a long time. Then he bowed, a gesture of respect from his culture, and returned to his group. Elena watched him go. She watched the sunset over New Thessaly, painting the sky in shades of orange and purple. She listened to the sounds of a colony at peace, a galaxy slowly learning to be better, a future that her children would inherit. The ghost of Kareth had frightened the galaxy one last time, but Elena Chen had given it something more valuable than fear. She had given it hope, and in the end, that was the most human thing of all.